What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron Bafflestone. So today I wanted to make a video response to a video I recently saw by Treantmonk called Darkness and Devil Sight, a problem combo in D&D. Now, this video is almost a year old, so a little late to the party here. What can I say? I just saw it. And I have to say, I disagree with Treantmonk's arguments and conclusions here, and felt obligated to share my analysis. No disrespect to Treantmonk, I greatly respect him. I think he's the top optimizer in the field, but I don't think his argument holds up here, and I feel obligated to talk about it with the optimizing community. So I will link Treantmonk's video in the video description below. I urge you all to watch it, but I will summarize his arguments here. First, in the video, he goes over some of the math to explain why darkness can be a useful thing. And I am not arguing with any of that. I do think darkness can be useful. As Treantmonk shows in this video, it can really get your damage levels up really high if you set it up correctly. And I think he actually undersold the defensive capabilities of it. Not being able to be seen by your enemy is a huge advantage in Dungeons & Dragons. It takes almost all save-based spells off the table. There are very few save-based spells that can affect someone that you can't see, and it's great against attack rolls because you get attacked at disadvantage if you can see them and they can't see you. So that is a really, really strong defense, which, when stacked with the excellent offensive capability, makes darkness a really good combo on paper. However, Treantmonk makes two arguments against it, where he actually does not recommend it now on any of his builds or as a viable tactic on any build. And I disagree with that conclusion. I think it's a bit too strong. I do agree that it can be problematic based on the two arguments that he makes, but I don't think they're as convincing as he makes them sound in his video. So the first problem that he has with darkness is that he claims that it is impossible to deploy without messing up your party, or at least very, very difficult. And the second argument against it is that it's useless against too many enemies due to the prevalence of blind sight and true sight. And I don't think either of these arguments holds up. So Treantmonk used certain maps in his video to make his case, and I am going to go ahead and put the first map that he placed on the screen. I think this is the most convincing or problematic map. And he makes the claim that you just can't deploy darkness in this scenario in a way that does not hinder your party. And I agree, you don't want to hinder your party. There are tons of sight-based abilities that your parties bring into the table that you do not want to take off the table because you might ruin their fun. And again, I agree 100% with Treantmonk that you don't want to ruin anybody else's fun. This is D&D, we're all here to have fun. So you don't want to deploy it if you're going to ruin other people's fun, but I disagree with him that you can't deploy it in a way that doesn't impede people's fun. So the first map I place up on the screen, and I need to first mention that Treantmonk made a slight mechanical error in how he deployed darkness or used darkness that actually makes it a little bit easier. So if you'll notice on his image, he's not actually using a 30-foot radius, or a 15-foot radius, a 30-foot diameter. That's what the spell description says. But if you'll see, he's actually using a 17.5-foot radius or 35-foot diameter because he's including his own square in the area of effect, which is understandable. It's a lot easier in Roll20 to just go ahead and put a 15-foot aura on your character, but as we see, that makes a 35-foot radius, which is too big. And it's not as simple as just creating a 12.5-foot radius in Roll20, because the fact is the center or the origin of the spell is not the center of your square. It's actually one of the four corners of your square, and you get to choose. So what this actually means is when you cast darkness, it's a 10-foot radius from one direction of you and 15 feet in the other direction, because you can place it on a corner that's far away from your party, and therefore the 15 feet radius on that side actually encompasses your square and only extends 10 feet beyond it. And so we see that there actually is a really good place to stand on this map, where you will be able to dart in and out of position to get eyes on the enemy, and then retreat to a point where your darkness is not impeding anyone else. And I've put that picture up on the screen so we can see that even if we're using the square circles radius thing that is so weird to 5e, that by placing the point of the spell in the far corner of where I'm standing, it simply does not extend far enough to interfere with my party. And then I will be able to dash in and out of that position and get my attacks off, and no one is impeded. So even on this map, which I think is a fairly convenient map for making the case that you can't do this, even here it works. Now, Treantmonk does put up a couple of other maps which are very close quarters, in which it's possibly not optimal to deploy darkness, but keeping in mind the rules that I just explained, it only extends 10 feet away from you. If you get into a corner and then your darkness is only covering 2 squares away from that corner, even in these pretty small environments, you can make it work. So it is more easily deployed than I think Treantmonk gives credit for here. And I do want to point out as well that players should have a bag, right? I mean, you should have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. And so just because a particular tactic doesn't work in plan A doesn't necessarily make it a bad tactic. I mean, if you're in close quarters with a low ceiling, then flight is not going to help you very much in that scenario. But does that mean flight is not an uber powerful ability in Dungeons and Dragons? Of course not. So I don't think the fact that there are suboptimal environments existing for certain tactics that make them suboptimal means that you should not try to set them up or ever use them or ever deploy them. Have a bag, have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, have a few different options that you can use based on the scenario or environment that you're in, and don't discard ones that are uber powerful in some environments just because they're bad in other environments. Again, my own character is built in this way, where I have built-in fly speed and I have Eldritch Spear, so I have 300-foot range. So anytime I'm in an outdoor environment, I basically have an auto-win. No, that doesn't help me when I'm underwater or underground or in a great number of environments, but in those open-air environments, my character reigns supreme. And that's a really nice tactic to have in the bag, and it's not something that I have to deploy every time, but when I do, it is just extremely effective, and I think darkness falls into that category. So what about Treantmonk's second argument, that darkness is not effective against creatures with blind sight or true sight? Well, that's true to a degree on paper in close quarters, but the funny thing about blind sight is that it typically has a very poor range. A lot of creatures out there with 10-foot blind sight, 30-foot blind sight. 60-foot blind sight is pretty rare, actually, and beyond that is extremely rare. So if we're already talking about a ranged character, I don't think that blind sight is too much of an impediment as long as you're not in close quarters. If you are in close quarters, I expect you to have a plan B, but showing this map that Treantmonk said would be ineffective because this purple worm has blind sight, sorry, it's got 30 feet of blind sight. We can easily get enough distance, and again, with our only 10-foot extension beyond us darkness, we should easily be able to find a spot where it doesn't impede our colleagues, and we cannot be seen by the blind sight creature. Even if it has long blind sight or true sight, which as we get into higher levels, a lot of enemies, BBEGs, have 120-foot true sight. What's the range on a bow? Longbow, 600 feet. Short bow, 320 feet. If you're using a hand crossbow, that's 120 feet, but have a backup bow. So you can get lots of distance away from somebody that has blind sight or true sight and still use this combo to great effect. Can you use it all the time? No. But you don't have tactics that work all the time in this game. You have to have a bag. So I don't agree with that argument either. So to recap, I don't agree with the argument that you can never, deploy it in a way that doesn't harm your party. And two, I don't buy the argument that there are enemies against which you can never deploy it. You simply have to be good and strong at positioning. And I get it. Positioning is something that players are not very good at in this game. I have played a lot of games and I have noticed, where to stand is actually something a lot more players, I think, should put some thought into. But if you are a high-level player who knows how to position, then I absolutely think that Darkness plus Devil's Sight is a great combo that you should not hesitate to deploy. And I certainly don't think that builds that make this a main combo are invalid. Personally, one of my favorite builds that I've done for this channel is my John Wick build, which was a Shadow Monk build. And Shadow Monks are fast. They're at least 40-foot move speed, if not 50. And again, the Darkness only sticks out 10 feet towards your colleagues on one side. So you're telling me a monk with 40 or 50-foot movement can't use Darkness in an effective way? I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I think my John Wick build is perfectly valid. I think it's really strong. And okay, maybe it's not a beginner's build. You have to know where to stand. But if you're a strong player and you're good with positioning, then I 100% think that Darkness plus Devil's Sight is a combo that is viable. And you should, or not necessarily should, but you can have it in your bag as one of many potential options to deploy depending on the circumstances and the environment. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is Treantmonk right? Is Treantmonk wrong? Are any of these arguments incorrect? Did we miss anything? Let me know in the comments, and regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Bron Bafflestone. See you next time.